It was a beautiful day. And there was this coming together, this recognition that this was such an historic moment. It's the kind of thing, frankly, that I remember having watched previously when there were peace agreements signed and thinking, that's something that I want to be a part of. And there I was looking around right in the middle of all of this and so excited about where this could lead.
In September 2020, the world saw what had been years, decades in the making. Landmark peace agreements dubbed the Abraham Accords, normalizing relations between Israel and two Arabian Gulf states, the United Arab Emirates and the Kingdom of Bahrain. Later, in December, they were joined by the Kingdom of Morocco. 5 years later, AJC is pulling back the curtain to meet key individuals who built the trust that led to these breakthroughs. Introducing the Architects of Peace.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, accompanied by the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, His Highness, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the United Arab Emirates, and the Minister of the Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Bahrain.
The guests of honor framed by the South Portico of the White House were an unlikely threesome. Two Arab foreign ministers and the Prime Minister of Israel, there to sign a pair of peace agreements that would transform the Middle East.
Thanks to the great courage of the leaders of these three countries, we take a major stride toward a future in which people of all faiths and backgrounds live together in peace and prosperity. There will be other countries very, very soon that will follow these great leaders.
President Trump's team had achieved what was long thought impossible. After decades of pretending Israel did not exist until it solved its conflict with the Palestinians, Trump's team discovered that attitudes across the Arab region had shifted, and after months of tense negotiations, an agreement had been brokered by a small circle of Washington insiders. On August 13, 2020, the United Arab Emirates agreed to become the first Arab state in a quarter century to normalize relations with Israel. Not since 1994 had Israel established diplomatic relations with an Arab country, when King Hussein of Jordan and Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin signed a treaty ending the state of war that had existed between them since Israel's rebirth. A ceremony to celebrate and sign the historic deal was planned for the South Lawn of the White House on September 15, 2020. Before the signing ceremony took place, another nation agreed to sign as well. Not too surprisingly, the Kingdom of Bahrain. After all, in June 2019, Bahrain had hosted the Peace to Prosperity Summit, a 2-day workshop where the Trump administration unveiled the economic portion of its peace plan, a 38-page prospectus that proposed ways for Palestinians and Arab countries to expand economic opportunities in cooperation with Israel. In addition to Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, all participated in the summit. The Palestinians boycotted it, even as Trump's senior advisor, Jared Kushner, presented plans to help them.
A lot of these investments people are unwilling to make because people don't want to put good money after bad money. They've seen in the past, they've made these investments, they've tried to help out the Palestinian people, and then all of a sudden, there's some conflict that breaks out, and a lot of this infrastructure gets destroyed. So what we have here is very detailed plans, and these are things that we can phase in over time, assuming there is a real ceasefire or a real peace, and there's the opportunity for people to start making these investments.
Now, Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain would open embassies, exchange ambassadors, and cooperate on tourism, trade, healthcare, and regional security. The accords not only permitted Israelis to enter the two Arab nations using their Israeli passports, it opened the door for Muslims to visit historic sites in Israel, pray at Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, the third holiest site in Islam, and finally satisfy their curiosity about the Jewish state. Before signing the accords, each leader delivered remarks. Here's Bahrain's Foreign Minister, Abdul Latif bin Rashid Al Zayani.
For too long, the Middle East has been set back by conflict and mistrust, causing untold destruction and thwarting the potential of generations of our best and brightest young people. Now, I'm convinced we have the opportunity to change that.
UAE's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan, echoed that sentiment and also addressed accusations by Palestinian leadership that the countries had abandoned them. He made it clear that the accords bolstered the Emirates' support for the Palestinian people and their pursuit of an independent state.
في التاريخ الإنساني منارة مضيئة لكل محبي السلام. وبالنسبة لنا فإن هذه المعاهدة ستمكننا من الوقوف أكثر إلى جانب الشعب الفلسطيني.
This new vision, he said, which is beginning to take shape as we meet today for the future of the region, full of youthful energy, is not a slogan that we raise for political gain as everyone looks forward to creating a more stable, prosperous, and secure future. This accord will enable us to continue to stand by the Palestinian people and realize their hopes for an independent state within a stable and prosperous region. The Truman Balcony, named for the first American president to recognize Israel's independence, served as the backdrop for a few iconic photographs. The officials then made their way down the stairs and took their seats at the table where they each signed 3 copies of the Abraham Accords in English, Hebrew, and Arabic. The brief ceremony combined formality and levity as the leaders helped translate for each other so someone didn't sign on the wrong dotted line. After that was settled, they turned the signed documents around to show the audience. When they all rose from their seats, Prime Minister Netanyahu paused. After the others put their portfolios down, he stood, displaying his for a little while longer, taking a few more seconds to hold on to the magnitude of the moment.
To all of Israel's friends in the Middle East, those who are with us today and those who will join us tomorrow, I say, Assalamu alaikum. Peace unto thee. Shalom. And you have heard from the President that he is already lining up more and more countries. This is unimaginable a few years ago. But with resolve, determination, a fresh look at the way peace is done, the blessings of the peace we make today will be enormous. First, because this peace will eventually expand to include other Arab states, and ultimately it can end the Arab-Israeli conflict once and for all.
But peace in Israel was and still is a distant reality, as Palestinian leadership did not participate in the Abraham Accords and in fact viewed it as a betrayal. As Netanyahu concluded his speech to the audience on the White House lawn, thousands of miles away, Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system intercepted 15 rockets fired by terrorists in Gaza, at least one striking Israel's coastal city of Ashdod. Iran's regime condemned the agreement. But across most of the region and around the world, the revelation that decades of hostility could be set aside to try something new, a genuine pursuit of peace, inspired hope. Saudi journalists wrote op-eds in support of the UAE and Bahrain. Egypt and Oman praised the Abraham Accords for adding stability to the region. Germany, the United Kingdom, France, and Spain commended the monumental step. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres welcomed the deal for paving the way toward a two-state solution. AJC's Chief Policy and Political Affairs Officer Jason Isaacson was one of more than 200 domestic and foreign officials on the White House lawn that day, taking it all in. The guest list included members of Congress, embassy staff, religious leaders, and people like himself who worked behind the scenes, a cross-section of people who had been part of a long history of relationship building and peacemaking in the Middle East for many years.
To see what was happening then, this meeting of neighbors who could be friends, to see the warmth evident on that stage at the south lawn of the White House, converging at that moment to mark the beginning of a development of a new Middle East. It was an exciting moment for me and for AJC, and one that not only will I never forget, but one that I am looking forward to reliving.
Jason, of course, is talking about his confidence in the expansion of the Abraham Accords. Through his position at AJC, he has attended several White House events marking milestones in the peace process. He had been seated on the south lawn of the White House 27 years earlier to watch a similar scene unfold, when Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat met to sign the Oslo Accords with President Bill Clinton.
What we are doing today is more than signing an agreement. It is a revolution. Yesterday, a dream. Today, a commitment. The Israeli and the Palestinian peoples, who fought each other for almost a century, have agreed to move decisively on the path of dialogue, understanding, and cooperation.
Brokered secretly by Norway, the Oslo Accords established mutual recognition between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, which claimed to represent the Palestinian people. It also led to the creation of a Palestinian Authority for interim self-government and a phased Israeli withdrawal from parts of the West Bank and Gaza.
1993 was a tremendous breakthrough, and it was a breakthrough between the State of Israel and an organization that had been created to destroy Israel. So it was a huge breakthrough to see the Israeli and Palestinian leaders agree to a process that would revolutionize that relationship, normalize that relationship, and set aside a very ugly history and chart a new path. That was historic.
While the Oslo Accords moved the Israelis and Palestinians toward a resolution, progress came to a halt 2 years later with the assassination of Prime Minister Rabin. In July 2000, President Clinton brought Arafat and then Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak to Camp David to continue discussions, but they could not agree. In his autobiography, My Life, President Clinton wrote that Arafat walked away from a Palestinian state, a mistake that Clinton took personally. When Arafat called him a great man, Clinton replied, "I'm not a great man. I'm a failure, and you made me one." Arafat's decision also would prove fatal for both Israelis and Palestinians. By September, the Second Intifada, 5 years of violence, terror attacks, and suicide bombings derailed any efforts toward peace. Jason says the Abraham Accords have more staying power than the Oslo Accords. That's clear 5 years later, especially after the October 7th Hamas terror attacks sparked a prolonged war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. 2 years into that war, the Abraham Accords have held. But Jason recalls feeling optimistic even as he sat there again on the South Lawn.
It was a different kind of historic moment, maybe a little less breathtaking in the idea of two fierce antagonists sort of laying down their arms and shaking hands, uneasily, but shaking hands. All those years later, in 2020, you had a state of Israel that had no history of conflict with the UAE or Bahrain, countries with real economies, with real investment potential, with wise and well-advised leaders who would be in a position to implement plans that were being put together in the summer and fall of 2020. The Oslo Accords, didn't provide that kind of built-in infrastructure to advance peace.
Jason pointed out that the only source of conflict among the signatories on the Abraham Accords was actually a point of mutual agreement, a frustration and desire to resolve the conflict with the Palestinians. UAE and Bahrain were part of the League of Arab States that had sworn in 2002 not to advance relations with Israel in the absence of a two-state solution. But 18 years later, that had gone nowhere, and leaders recognized that perhaps it would be more beneficial to the Palestinian cause if they at least engaged with Israel.
I had no fear sitting in a folding chair on the White House lawn on September 15th that this was going to evaporate. This seemed to be a natural progression. The region is increasingly sophisticated and increasingly plugged into the world, and recognizing that they have a lot of catching up to do to advance the welfare of their people, and that catching up is going to require integrating with a very advanced country in their region that they have shunned for too long. This is a recognition that I am hearing across the region, not always spoken in those words, but it's clear that it will be of benefit to the region to have Israel as a partner. rather than an isolated island that somehow is not a part of that region.
I want to thank all of the members of Congress for being here.
AJC CEO Ted Deutch also was at the White House that day, not as AJC CEO, but as a congressman who served on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs and chaired its subcommittee on the Middle East, North Africa, and global counterterrorism.
It was a beautiful day. And there was this coming together, this recognition that this was such an historic moment. And it's exactly the kind of thing, frankly, that I remember having watched previously when there were peace agreements signed and thinking, that's something that I want to be a part of. And there I was looking around right in the middle of all of this and so excited about where this could lead.
Despite his congressional role, Ted learned about the deal along with the rest of the world when it was initially announced a month before the ceremony, though he did get a tip that something was in the pipeline that would change the course of the committee's work.
I found out when I got a phone call from the Trump administration, someone who was a senior official who told me that there is big news that's coming, that the Middle East is never going to look the same, and that he couldn't share any other information. And we, of course, went into wild speculation mode about what that could be. And the Abraham Accords was the announcement, and it was as dramatic as he suggested.
It was a small glimmer of light during an otherwise dark time. Remember, this was the summer and early fall of 2020. The COVID pandemic, for the most part, had shut down the world. People weren't attending meetings, conferences, or parties. Even members of Congress were avoiding Capitol Hill and casting their votes from home.
It was hard to make great strides in anything in the diplomatic field because there weren't the kind of personal interactions taking place on a regular basis. It didn't have the atmosphere that was conducive to meaningful, deep, ongoing conversations about the future of the world. And that's really what this was about. And that's what was missing. And so here was this huge news that for the rest of the world felt like it was out of the blue, that set in motion a whole series of steps in Congress about the way that our committee, the way we approach the region, that we could finally start talking about regional cooperation in ways that we couldn't before.
The timing was especially auspicious, as it boosted interest in a particular piece of legislation that had been in the works for a decade, the bipartisan Nida M. Lowy Middle East Partnership for Peace Act. Approved by Congress in December 2020, around the same time Morocco joined the Abraham Accords, the law allocated up to $250 million over 5 years for programs advancing peaceful coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians and supporting a sustainable two-state solution. Passed as part of a larger appropriations bill, it was the largest investment of any single country in Israeli-Palestinian civil society initiatives.
Here we were having this conversation about increasing trade, increasing tourism, and the countries working more closely together and being able to freely fly back and forth on a regular basis, something that we've seen as the tourism numbers have taken off, the trade has taken off. So it really changed what we do.
The other thing Ted recalls about that day on the White House lawn was the bipartisan spirit in the air. Although his own committee didn't tend to divide along party lines, Congress had become quite polarized and partisan on just about everything else. On that day, just as there was no animus between Israelis and Arabs, there was none between Republicans and Democrats either. And Ted believes that's the way it always should be.
It was a bipartisan showing of support because this was a really important moment for the region and for the world. And it's exactly the kind of moment where we should look for ways to work together. And this issue had to do with the Middle East, but it was driven out of Washington. There's no doubt about that. It was driven out of the Trump administration and the White House. And that was, I think, a reminder of the kind of things that can happen in Washington, and that we need to always look for those opportunities. And when any administration does the right thing, then they need to be given credit for it, whether elected officials are on the same side of the aisle or not. We were there as people who were committed to building a more peaceful and prosperous region, with all of the countries in the region recognizing the contributions that Israel makes and can make as the region is expanded, and then thinking about what the chances that we would have in the years ahead to build upon this in really positive ways.
On that warm September day, it felt as if the Abraham Accords not only had the potential to heal a rift in the Middle East, but also teach us some lessons here at home. Even if it was impossible to resolve every disagreement, the Abraham Accords proved that progress and peace are possible when there are shared strategic interests, relationships, and a shared concern for the greater good.
I hope that as we celebrate this 5th anniversary, that in this instance, we allow ourselves to do just that. This is a celebratory moment, and I hope that we can leave politics out of this. I hope that we're able to just spend a moment thinking about what's been achieved during these 5 years and how much all of us, by working together, will be able to achieve, not just for Israel, but for the region, in the best interest of the United States, and in so doing, ultimately for the world. That's what this moment offers.
In the next episode, we meet Israelis and Arabs who embraced the spirit of the Abraham Accords and seized unprecedented opportunities to collaborate. Thank you for listening. Atara Lakritz is our producer. TK Broderick is our sound engineer. Special thanks to Jason Isaacson, Sean Savage, and the entire AJC team for making this series possible. You can subscribe to Architects of Peace on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can learn more at ajc.org/Architects of Peace. The views and opinions of our guests don't necessarily reflect the positions of AJC. You can reach us at podcasts@ajc.org. If you've enjoyed this episode, please be sure to spread the word and hop onto Apple Podcasts or Spotify to rate us and write a review to help more listeners find us.